in just a minute, dealing with Colin Kaepernick. What we're going to do when we come back from the break, we'll jump into Donald Trump and impeachment inquiry. Before the break, we're going to deal with Colin Kaepernick going to the Thanksgiving event. Okay, so Colin Kaepernick said it's our responsibility to honor our elders. Colin Kaepernick spent Thanksgiving Day, addressing a group at the Indigenous People sunrise ceremony on San Francisco's Alcatraz Island. Now, Fox News reported the ceremony, known as Thanksgiving, which honors the 50th anniversary of when Native Americans began occupying the island. Okay. The Alcatraz Island, which formerly housed the infamous federal prison Alcatraz. Colin Kaepernick tweeted his support of the event. He said, quote, spent the morning at the Indigenous People sunrise ceremony on the 50th anniversary of the occupation of Alcatraz. The U.S. government has stolen over 1.5 billion acres of land from indigenous people, and also African people were here for tens of thousands of years as well. So it was African people and Native Americans that the land was stolen from. Thank you to my indigenous family. I'm with you today and always, end quote, as he signed off with the Black Power fist. Now, Colin Kaepernick also retweeted a Washington Post perspective piece that shines a light on the racist roots of Thanksgiving. Now, let me just say this. I may say some things that go outside the circumference of your own awareness. Just because you never heard them before, disagree with them, or don't like them does not mean that they are not true. It just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm dealing with history. I'm not against people getting together with their family on Thanksgiving, you know, things like that, and spending time with their families. So I'm not against that at all. And I talked about that in my broadcast also. Okay, but we're dealing with history here. Okay, so in an article the Washington Post had on right around Thanksgiving Day, I think it was November 27th, writer Christopher Petrella, who teaches in the Race, Gender, and Cultural Studies Collaborative at American University, states that Sarah Josepha Buell Hale, H-A-L-E, Sarah Josepha Hale, okay, known as the godmother of Thanksgiving. Now, Sarah Josepha Hale was also the woman that wrote the nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb. She also wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb. That's Sarah Josepha Hale. She is the woman credited with the modern-day incarnation of Thanksgiving. Okay, she went on a letter writing campaign, and she petitioned for it for a number of years, something like 25, 30 years, reaching out to politicians, etc. So it was in October 1863 that Abraham Lincoln held the first national day of thanks, which we call Thanksgiving. But she's known as Sarah Josepha Hale is known as the godmother of Thanksgiving. She suggested the holiday as a way to bring the nation together, much like the 4th of July. Christopher Petrella in the piece from the Washington Post said, quote, yet her conception of all of the people, quote unquote, all of the people who would observe this holiday excluded at least one group, free black people, as she made clear in an 1830 article titled 4th of July that appeared in the Ladies Magazine and Literary Gazette. In that piece, Sarah Josepha Hale wrote that, quote, it should not be argued, it should not be urged to have the slaves set at liberty till they can be sent to their own land, because they never can be free here. It should not be urged to have the slaves set at liberty till they can be sent to their own land, because they never can be free here. Okay? And then Petrella went on to state in the article, adding that while Sarah Josepha Hale was against slavery, she envisioned free slaves moving back to Africa and not living in America. This is very interesting, because we were here before you got here. I mean, that's very interesting. You know, that's like gentrification. We were here before you got here. What are you talking about? Now, Colin Kaepernick, the former NFL quarterback, has attended the Native American event for the past several years. In 2016, he tweeted a video showing a man taking the island by right of discovery. Okay, let's go to this clip. TheGrio.com has an article. Let's go to this clip here that Colin Kaepernick posted.
The Native Americans reclaimed this land known as Alcatraz Island in the name of all American Indians by right of discovery. We will purchase said Alcatraz Island for $24 in glass beads and red cloth, a precedent set by the white man's purchase of a similar island about 300 years ago. Signed, Indians of all tribes, November 1969, San Francisco, California.
It's been 50 years since the occupation, and that struggle has continued for that 50 years. Before that 50 years, it will continue from this point. It's our responsibility to honor our ancestors and honor our elders by carrying on that struggle. Don't let their sacrifices be in vain.
Got about 1 minute.
That's why it's important for all of us to be here today. To show that we're together, that we're unified, that we have that solidarity. And I hope this...
Okay. All right. So that was Colin Kaepernick at the Thanksgiving Day event. TheGriot.com has a good article dealing with this. Colin Kaepernick spoke at Thanksgiving Day event in honor of Native Americans. GRIO, The Griot. And I know we're coming up on the break. We're going to continue this for a couple minutes on the other side of the break, because I want to give you a little background history. And we're going to deal with that 1621. When we see that picture of Native Americans and quote-unquote pilgrims serving them in 1621, what we are told was the first Thanksgiving, how that meeting came together is not how we have been taught that it happened. So we're going to deal with what we see in that picture, but from the Wampanoag Native American perspective. We'll deal with that on the other side of the break, and then we'll deal with the Trump impeachment inquiry. 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio, the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, December 8th, 2019. And we are live, okay? Shout out to everybody watching me on Facebook as well, on our fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and then also on 9:10 a.m. Superstation's Facebook page also, 9:10 a.m. Superstation. All right, I will be, let's see, Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History on December 19th. Thursday, December 19th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. They are celebrating Dr. Carter G. Woodson's birthday. Now, Dr. Carter G. Woodson is the co-founder of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. He's also the creator of Negro History Week in 1926, which in 1976 became Black History Month, and now that is African American History Month. All right. December 19th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., they are going to have special guests, Dr. Payro Dagbovie, PhD, who's a history professor at Michigan State University. He also wrote a fantastic book on Dr. Carter G. Woodson, okay? And then also Dr. Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham, who is from the who's the department chair at Victor S. Thomas, and she's a Victor S. Thomas Professor of History and of African American Studies, African and African American Studies at Harvard University. Okay, so this is taking place at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, Thursday, December 19th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., free and open to the public. I should be there also, I think. All right, right before the break, we were talking about Colin Kaepernick attending a Thanksgiving Day event, okay? And this took place in San Francisco, Alcatraz Island in San Francisco, all right? When we look at the history of Thanksgiving, we see that famous painting, okay? The painting done by John Leon Jerome, G-E-R-O-M-E, Jerome Ferris, okay? And it depicts what we were taught was the first Thanksgiving in 1621. But when we look at what really happened at that first Thanksgiving, we know that if we look at this article here from Indian Country Today, Indian Country Today, it talks about what really happened at the first Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag side of the story. And when you hear about the Pilgrims and the Indians harmoniously sharing the first Thanksgiving meal in 1621, the Indians referred to so generically are the ancestors of the contemporary members of the Wampanoag Nation. As the story commonly goes, the Pilgrims who sailed from England on the Mayflower and landed at what became Plymouth, Massachusetts, in 1620 had a good harvest the next year. So Plymouth Governor William Bradford organized a feast to celebrate the harvest and to invite a group of Native American allies, including the Wampanoag chief Massasoit, okay, to the party. The feast lasted 3 days, and according to chronicler Edward Winslow, Governor William Bradford sent 4 men on a fowling mission to prepare for the feast, and the Wampanoag guests brought 5 deer to the party. And ever since then, the story goes, Americans have celebrated Thanksgiving on the 4th Thursday of November. But that's not exactly what historically happened. So Ramona Peters, who is the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe's Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, she was interviewed by Indian Country Today Media Network, and she talked about what happened in 1621 at what we were taught was the first Thanksgiving. Okay, so when we look at the Wampanoag version of what really happened, you've probably heard the story of how Squanto, who was a Native American named Squanto, assisted in the planting of corn and taught the Europeans there how to plant corn, how to fish, things like this. So this was their first successful harvest, and they were celebrating that harvest and planning a day of their own Thanksgiving. And it's kind of like what some of the Arab nations do when they celebrate by shooting guns in the air. So this is what was going on over there at Plymouth, Massachusetts. They were shooting guns and cannons as a celebration, which alerted us, the Wampanoag. We didn't know who they were shooting at. So Massasoit, the chief, gathered some 90 warriors and showed up at Plymouth prepared to engage. If that was what was happening, if they were taking any of our people. The reason why they went to find out what was going on is because a treaty was signed between the Wampanoag Nation of Native Americans and the Europeans on the Mayflower, and they picked one person to represent the Europeans on the Mayflower, and he signed the treaty on behalf of the nation of England. Okay, so it was a treaty between the nation of England and the Wampanoag Nation to watch each other's back, to protect the Wampanoag from their enemies, and to protect the European settlers from people who were trying to attack them. So when Massasoit and the Wampanoag hear the gunshots and the cannons being fired, they don't know what's going on. So they show up in force, okay, like Bumpy Johnson, okay, coming to back up Malcolm X to find out what's going on. All right, this is what happened. Okay, so they were shooting guns and cannons as a celebration, which alerted us because we didn't know who they were shooting at. So Massasoit gathered up some 90 warriors and showed up at Plymouth prepared to engage. If that was what was happening, if they were taking any of our people, they didn't know what was going on. It was a fact-finding mission. So when they arrived, it was explained through a translator that the European settlers were celebrating the harvest. So we decided to stay and make sure that was true, because we had seen in the other landings, like Captain John Smith in Virginia, even the Vikings had been there, had come to this land, okay, around 1000 AD. So we wanted to make sure, so we decided to camp nearby for a few days. During those few days, the men went out to hunt and gather food, deer, ducks, geese, and fish. There are 90 men here. There are 90 men here at the time. I think there are only 23 survivors of the Mayflower ship. So you can imagine the fear. Okay, so this is what was taking place. But when we see that painting, okay, from 1621, and we're told that's the first Thanksgiving, we see a misrepresentation of the history, how that painting came to be. Okay, so check out this article from Indian Country Today Media Network.com. What really happened at the first Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag side of the tale. Read the article from which one's this other article? NBCWashington.com. NBCWashington.com. Native Americans to hold 50th gathering of grief in Plymouth, Massachusetts, because the United American Indians of New England each year in Plymouth, Massachusetts hold a National Day of Mourning commemoration, a National Day of Mourning commemoration. And they hold this solemn remembrance on every Thanksgiving Day. They've held it since 1970 to recall what organizers describe as, quote, the genocide of millions of Native people, the theft of Native lands, and the relentless assault on Native culture, end quote. Okay, so check out this article as well. And watch I did like a 2-hour broadcast on Thanksgiving Day going deep into all this history, and I don't have that time right now to get to it, but that gives you some background information. Okay, so let's jump to the impeachment inquiry of the traitor-in-chief